Thank you. Further debate, the member from Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. Good morning. I rise to speak on the time allocation motion on Bill 213. And this time allocation motion, like most time allocation motions, but this one especially, raises some serious questions about the government's commitment to democratic and citizen engagement. The people of this province need time to comment on this bill. 29 schedules, Speaker, and if this time allocation motion passes, people have till tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m. to sign up and speak to committee. And then we only have 2 days of public hearings. So I ask, what message does that send to the people of Ontario about whether their government actually wants to hear from them, wants their input on some really important pieces of this legislation? Now, I understand why the government might want to really fast-track this through, without any public engagement, because Schedule 2 is a schedule that essentially legislates hate. And I understand why the government doesn't want to hear from the Canadian Muslim Society, from LGBTQ2+ rights organizations, from Haitian organizations, from many organizations that I'm sure want to speak, even Christian organizations. I mean, Charles McVety was kicked off the Christian television network for spewing hate. So I would understand why the government would not want to hear from people around Schedule 2, because I think they're going to get an earful. Because there's a lot of pain in this province right now. A lot of people feeling pain that Charles McVety would be getting the kind of special treatment that he's receiving in this legislation. Especially when, if the government wants to have this, hide behind this independent PCAP process, they could put it in a bill after the process takes place. They don't have to preempt the process by having it in a bill. So I understand why they would not want to hear from people on that. But let's think about a few other schedules in this bill that I think we really need to hear from the people of Ontario. Schedule 3 is about changing your name. I've had constituents reach out with concerns around that schedule, and I think they would like to come to committee, and I'd like to hear at committee the concerns that people have. So maybe we need to amend the bill or make some adjustments to the bill to address those concerns, but will people have time, especially given there's 29 schedules? Schedule 7 talks about the Insurance Act. I know there are cosmetic changes, but I can tell you there are so many small businesses in this province right now who are deeply upset about the fact that their insurance companies are not honoring business interruption insurance, and in some cases aren't even insuring them. So when we talk about the Insurance Act and have a conversation at committee, I would think there would be a lot of small businesses, especially in a bill that says Smarter for Business Act, that would like to come to committee and talk about how insurance isn't working for small businesses when we talk about Schedule 7. Schedule 16 makes changes to the Ontario Highway Transportation Board Repeal Act. I would think, particularly in rural communities that are underserviced when it comes to intercity bus transportation, would like to talk about this. There might be some good and bad things that the government is proposing here. We certainly need to come up with some innovative and smart ways to improve intercity bus transit in this province. But with 2 days of public hearings, are we going to have the opportunity to really have a fulsome conversation about Schedule 16? Probably not, Speaker. That's an important conversation I want to have. I can't tell you how many people in my region of the province are asking why we don't have direct intercity bus connections between Guelph and KW or Guelph and Hamilton, etc. I'd love to have the opportunity to talk about it, but it's going to be hard with 2 days of public hearings. Schedule 18, and I'm going to not go through all 29 schedules, but I want to speak a bit about Schedule 18. I think it's good that the government, I want to compliment the government on one part of Schedule 18. I think it's good that the government is giving municipalities the right to say no to new water bottling operations. But First Nations in their treaty territories are asking for the same right. Will we have an opportunity to hear from Six Nations, for example, who've raised concerns about their treaty rights to say no to new water bottling operations. Will we hear from other First Nations who would like to have maybe the same right that municipalities are going to be granted under Schedule 18? And I can tell you, and this relates specifically to my own municipality, the riding I represent, wants to talk about what about adjacent municipalities who the proposal may not be specifically in that municipality, but the proposal directly affects the municipality's water-taking wells. That's exactly what's happening in Guelph. Most of our wells are outside the city limits and would be directly impacted by proposals for new water bottling taking permits, but because it's not specifically in the municipal boundary, that new right for municipalities won't be available. I'd like to hear from municipalities directly affected by this who want to say good things about what the government's doing, but also maybe want to propose some changes to make it available to some others. But Speaker, we're probably not going to have time for it because the government's rushing this through. So I'm encouraging all MPPs to vote against this time allocation motion. Let's give us some time to have a conversation. Let's give small businesses an opportunity to come and talk about how this pandemic is affecting them and the supports they need in a bill that says it's Smarter for Business Act. Let's give people time to participate in their democracy. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate?